Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we've got a 7-game slate for Saturday. This slate is not very good. All the good games are in the early slates, but as far as the teams here, we have a few good teams that are pretty stackable. We're going to be looking at the Dodgers, the Mets, um, and the LA Angels, I guess. There's not a lot here. It's a kind of funky slate here. But overall, we do have some decent pitchers to choose from here, so let's go and get into that. So Max Scherzer is obviously the top pitcher on the slate. Now, he's had a 55, 64, and 37-point game versus Atlanta this season in 3 games, and he's had a pretty good amount of strikeouts in those games. Atlanta is playing very well, though, so do be aware, and these two teams are fighting to win the division there. They're tied right now, so these games are extremely important both directions. So he will play deep into the game, I'm sure, and he does have a lot of upside as a result. And Atlanta does tend to strike out, but they also tend to hit home runs. So you have to kind of... He's a little bit safer over here on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, but he's still a little bit risky. Then we're going to look at Dylan Case, who's against San Diego. Now, he's been very consistent lately, and he has 40-point upside in this game, and his floor is probably higher than most of the other options. Plus, he gets a decent amount. He doesn't always get a ton of strikeouts, but he gets enough that he gives himself a nice floor here. And he hasn't really had too many earned runs lately, so that's always a bonus. He's been getting some quality starts and stuff. So he's in a pretty decent spot. And then Christian Javier. Now, he's more valuable on DraftKings than on FanDuel. He has a high floor, and he's had 39 fantasy points against Tampa Bay last time out. And he's only given up 1 earned run in the last 4 games. And he's been getting a lot of strikeouts, so he does definitely have some upside here. And he's just not quite as ideal as he is on DraftKings, but he's still good. I'm basically going to have to figure out how I'm going to decide between Scherzer and Javier, and probably going to go with Javier on the slate simply because he's a little bit safer than Scherzer. But overall, those are pretty much the top 3 pitchers. And if you really want to find value, and I don't really recommend it, but you could probably look at Luis Ortiz, who's only pitched in 3 games, but he's only given up 2 earned runs in those 3 games. And while he did have a game against Chicago, Cubs, and Cincinnati, outside one against the Yankees, where he only gave up 1 earned run, and he's gotten at least 5 strikeouts. Now, he's not probably going to get a win or a quality start here, but he could be a real safety pick at a very cheap price. I don't really recommend it, but if you're just desperate to save money at the position, then that would be the way to do it. At first base, Pete Alonso is the top option here for the Mets against Atlanta. Now, Kyle Wright is a pretty good pitcher, and he's getting a lot of wins and stuff like that. I don't know that this is going to be the easiest game for either team, but if I had to pick some guys from this team, I'm probably going to be picking on the Mets side for this particular game. And Pete Alonso he's averaging 22 fantasy points for the last 10 games. I mean, what else do you want? Dan Vogelbach is another guy you could take a look at as a secondary option. He has hit about 10 fantasy points a game last 10, but he's been a little bit boom or bust, so just be aware. Matt Olson, if you want to go with Atlanta guys, he's in a pretty good spot. He's had 5 straight really solid games, and his price is cheap, and so he's definitely useful on this particular slate. Freddie Freeman is also looking really good for the Dodgers in this, where he really hadn't had a bad game lately, and so that's what you really like to utilize. Safe players, obviously his price is pretty expensive. Will Smith's another guy that's looking really good for this particular slate, and his price is actually pretty cheap as well. And then finally, Nate Lowe, Daniel Lowe for Texas. Now, I don't love him in this situation, but he's been hitting the ball kind of boom or bust lately, but if he can hit a home run, then he'll definitely pay off by a lot. His price is also extremely cheap for his recent production. At second base, we got Max Muncy, and he can play second or third base. This game against Colorado should be stackable for the Dodgers very easily, simply because a lot of their guys are hitting the ball well. And at least over here on FanDuel, some of them are a little bit cheaper, so you can really pay for a guy like Muncy. Simeon is another guy I like for Texas against the Angels. He's been having some really massive games, though. He is boom or bust. His price isn't too extreme. Altuve is a little bit risky in this matchup against McClanahan. But he's one of the few guys on the team that you want to take a look at, though he is kind of boom or bust lately. And then Rengifo for the Angels. I really like him. if you could pair him and Muncy at second and third base, I think that would be a really good pair here. He's been pretty safe the last few games, and he's been hitting the ball well, and he's really inexpensive. Jeff McNeil is another guy you could consider. He's had a really good career against Kyle Wright, and so he's somebody to consider on this particular slate. At third base, we have Muncy, obviously, and Rengifo. And then we also have Alex Bregman for Houston. Obviously, a little bit of tougher matchup, but he has been hitting the ball pretty well lately. And then we have Josh Jung for Texas. He's been kind of boomer bust lately, but he's starting to hit the ball again, which, he just needs to hit home run to pay off here, which he has capacity to do in this particular matchup. At shortstop, we have 4 guys for you to take a look at. Trey Turner is the top option here. Now, he's very boomer bust, but the Dodgers obviously in a great situation. Seager for Texas is also good. He's been a little bit better than Turner lately, but he is getting hits in most games, which is important here. And then Lindor for the Mets. If you stack the Mets, then he's going to be somebody you want to take a look at. He's just been hitting the ball pretty good lately, and he's having some big games occasionally. And then finally, Willie Adames for the Milwaukee Brewers. Even though he's against Edward Cabrera, I think he's got a really solid chance to have a good game here, though he hasn't been very good lately. It's just a matter of time for him to hit another home run. At the outfield position, we have Juan Soto. Now, I like Dylan Case, so it's not ideal, but he is hitting the ball pretty decently lately, and I think he's in a good spot, averaging 14 fantasy points a game. Mookie Betts for the Dodgers is obviously in a good spot. His price is high, and his production he's finally starting to get out of a slump, and so I do like him here, but he is a little bit risky. Trout and Ohtani both are good plays on this particular slate. I tell you, it's really hard to find much on the slate because, the pitching is so wonky, but overall, he's a really safe option. He's been hitting the ball really well lately. And then, of course, Ohtani has also been hitting the ball pretty good. Not quite as good as Trout, but he is have some upside in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Alvarez for Houston. He's averaging 16 fantasy points a game. He is kind of boomer bust lately, but he's in a good spot here. Ronald Acuna, if you decide to go with some Braves, he's going to be a guy, and you could also look at Michael Harris as well. But both of them have had some struggles against the starting pitcher for the Mets today. And then Brandon Nimmo is a guy I actually really like here, and his price is pretty fair. He's been good against Wright in his career, and he's hitting the ball really well lately. And then Kyle Tucker for Houston, another guy that's in a tough spot against McClanahan, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately. And then finally, Tyler Ward for the Angels. I really like him. He's been hitting the ball extremely well lately, having some solid game after solid game after solid game. And if you could, you could do a Angel stack with him, Trout, and Luis Rengifo. I think that's a pretty solid stack for this particular slate. Overall, it's really hard to find a lot on this slate. There's just a lot of ugly pitching matchups and stuff like that. And there's several young pitchers that are pitching that are actually kind of decent, and then some that are really bad. But the teams they're playing aren't necessarily teams that you want to stack typically in bad situations, and pitchers, ballparks, and stuff like that. So it's a really funky slate. I wouldn't recommend going too hard on this particular slate, and obviously be aware that some of these pitchers might change. It seemed like yesterday we had some pitching changes too, so that's a little bit of an annoyance. But as the season winds down and teams are trying to save for the playoffs and stuff, some guys don't go as deep in the game and stuff like that. That's what definitely makes Scherzer more interesting in this particular slate, and you do have to be aware for Javier if he doesn't go too deep. So with that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.